Hey, what's going on, guys? This is the SS Ultimate Goku back with another video, and I'm finally doing the review of the most anticipated film movie of the year, and that is the Venom film, the Venom movie. And I know I didn't do this review right away. I waited a long time to do this review because of a lot of just because personally I had a lot of stuff going on, and there's just so much stuff going on, and then of course also the issues with what was going into this film, with a lot of the controversies and a lot of the bad bullshit reviews that this film got going into it. It's making the most money so far. It just recently, I believe, I think I just read a report about it just breaking the China box office record, too. So this film has done very good for itself. It broke the October record, all-time October record. Of course, Halloween a couple of weeks later was close to re-breaking that record. They did not break the Venom record. But they did break the previous record that Venom had broken 2 weeks prior to that. Halloween film will be another thing that I want to review too, because I did go see that. But this is about Venom, obviously. And we're going to get into the review, and I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that I liked, and basically the overall product of the film. And I might talk about some of the issues with some of the stuff, but I already had done a video about a certain user that I criticized for his very uncompromising words of the Venom film going into this. But I want to say this right now to anybody who's watching this right now. If you have not seen any of my videos on this matter, I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you have not watched Venom, I highly, highly recommend this film to you. This is a 9 out of 10 film, and my personal opinion, all right, this is the film of the year for live action right now, as of right now. This is the film to watch. Live action genre, superhero genre, best of the year, period, end of discussion, as of right now. In 2018, it's a 9 out of 10 film. Don't listen to Rotten Tomatoes, because they're a bunch of idiots that tried to bury this film, because this film was a very, very good film. And I'm waiting 15 years for a Venom film, especially after the Spider-Man 3 film came out, because the Spider-Man 3 film was trash. Okay. I don't like Spider-Man. I don't give a shit about Spider-Man. I never was a fan of Spider-Man. I was always a fan of Venom. It's the only character I cared about in the Spider-Man franchise. And so this was the film I was looking for. And I give a lot of kudos to Sony Pictures for doing this. I know a lot of people were curious of how a film with Venom without Spider-Man was going to work. And I think they did it very good. Is it a true adaptation of the comic books? No, but there's a lot of MCU stuff that is not a true adaptation of the comic books as well. Whether you want to argue the cinematic rights because of that or because of other things, doesn't matter. They still did it. So people that are complaining about this really need to stop complaining about it. And I've also heard issues about this film being not rated R over PG, PG-13. I'm sorry. And please, these same people that are saying that it needed to be rated R are the same people that want Sony Pictures to lose the rights to Spider-Man. In general, they want them to lose the cinematic rights to the franchises altogether. May I remind you, if Disney and Kevin Feige were working on this film right now, I want you people to understand this film would not have been rated R. It would have been PG-13 the same way, regardless of what Kevin Feige would have decided to do with this film. So stop being hypocrites, because regardless if it had been done by Disney, Marvel Studios, or if it had been done by Sony Pictures, it would have still been PG-13. So people need to stop getting on that train wreck about that argument, because that is so stupid. And I think they did it very good, the way they did it for a PG-13 film. They made it as rated R as it possibly could be for a PG-13 film, and I think they did a really good job. There was 40 minutes cut that even Tom Hardy was not happy about. I don't know if they'll be ever released for the DVD Blu-ray releases as an alternate uncut version. I have no idea. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. I think the film itself, the way it was good, regardless of what they had. That would just be more tidbits for me and anyone else at this point, because I think the film I actually have to disagree with Tom Hardy. I actually think the film was good without whatever they have. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something that he knows that was in there that he wanted in there. But I think the film overall, by what the film was, I think was fine on its own. But maybe there was something that Tom Hardy really liked that he wanted in there. That hopefully we'll be able to see what it is in the future. But for right now, what I think was in the film, I think was very good, and it was definitely a fitting story, in my personal opinion. So with all that stuff, let's get into the review. So this film, okay, so some of the characters are very vague to me. For some of the characters that are being portrayed in here, since most of the stuff I know about this is Venom and Carnage, which we'll get to Carnage later, since he's not really the focal point of this movie. But I want to just say right now, like I've been saying, is there will be spoilers. So, like I said, if you don't want to hear anything, get out of the video now if you haven't seen the movie. So yeah, let's get into the film. So this film starts off with like an outer space atmosphere. They have like the symbiote, coming down. Well, it's actually a rocket with the symbiote, and it comes down. Rocket falls down, and it just destroys everything. And then coincidentally enough, there is basically this guy who like survives or whatever, and he survives. And so because he survives, what happens is that they're basically, the ambulance are coming in to getting him checked out and stuff like that. So he goes into the ambulance, and basically he gets up and like looks like he's all possessed, and basically takes control of the hospital person, the ambulance person. And so now the symbiote, has taken over this person's body, and she is now the symbiote is now in control of this woman, and so now she's just walking around and trying to I don't know what she's trying to look for, but she's trying to look for something basically. Carlton Drake, who is basically this guy who's in a secret laboratory. He's basically trying to, he's talking about, the project and the symbiotes. They ended up capturing one of the other symbiotes. Like this symbiote that's like inside this ambulance is it's a different symbiote than the ones that they captured. And so Carlton Drake is just, he's basically experimenting on he's experimenting on like different stuff, you know, under the hush hush type thing, you know, because you know he can do what he wants basically. So and no one can really basically stop him, and that's kind of where this whole story takes place. This whole symbiote thing. We don't know though. I will add this: we don't exactly know exactly where, or not where, but when this takes place. I mean, we know it takes place in San Francisco. But we don't know is what year this takes place. Obviously, this has to take place in somewhere around, you know, this time frame, whether it be this year, 2017, 2015. It has to be in like a recent year because of the way the technology is formatted and stuff like that. Excuse me. But we don't know exactly where this is set up. You know, maybe that's possibly done for a possible MCU crossover that people are theorizing right now. As of right now, I want to just state this right now. This is not an MCU movie, and this is not affiliated with the MCU, but it could be in the future down the line since the film did become successful. But as of right now, as of the time of me making this review, it is not associated at all with the MCU. So please do not get that in your idea that I'm insinuating that, but that was just one of the things that I just came up with since there's no real time frame of where exactly this year, or what year this took place in. So yeah. So we get to Eddie Brock, and Eddie Brock, he's basically starts off with his girlfriend, Anne. And Anne is, you know, his girlfriend, and she is basically an attorney, lawyer, basically, and he is a reporter. So he's reporting stuff, and so you know they're making out and stuff like that. They're doing their little makeout game, of course, with Eddie Brock. He is, you know, he's just kind of full of himself. He's like one of these characters that's full of himself, which that's Eddie Brock. You know, he's you know, when he goes to work, he does the, you know, oh, don't worry about it, you know, because he has a motorcycle stuff. He parks it, you know, right in the front. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. You know, he talks the way out with the secretary and stuff like that, and eventually gets to the elevator and stuff like that. So you know, that's kind of where he's at as a character. He goes in the elevator after that, and you know, he meets up with his boss, and you know, he talks about how what went down in New York, and whatnot. And you know, he tells him he basically wants him to do an interview, or a report actually, with Carlton Drake, you know, the person who's running this, you know, NASA mission basically with the symbiotes. So he's basically wanting him to, you know, basically do this reporting, and Eddie Brock doesn't want to do it. You know, he doesn't like this guy. He thinks he knows there's something up with this dude, but he can't put his finger on it. But he says, you know, just do a couple things here, ask a couple questions, and just be on your way. You know, we just want to, you know, a regular story. And he's like, you know, he says, you know, yes, fine, whatever. They cut back eventually to him actually talking with his wife about this because he doesn't want to do it. Or not his wife, I'm sorry. Not his wife, his girlfriend. They do, though, mention that, you know, Eddie Brock wants to marry Anne, which she, you know, agrees to marry him. There's that. So now they're quote unquote engaged to be married, but you know, she doesn't want to really do this, but you know, he tells her, you know, you should do it. You know, and coincidentally enough, the firm that Anne works for, actually, you know, has him as like a client, has this Carlton Drake as a client. So there's that whole conflict of interest, so to speak. So Well, we cut back to the symbiote. The girl in the ambulance that was taken over by the symbiote. Um, Basically, she confronts this shop, this, I guess, fish shop or seafood shop. I don't exactly know, but the person had like this eel fish, I think, and it was a live one, and he took it out. She took it out of the thing, and she just took a bite of it, and like a guy was like, a shop person was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And she just like, she's all pissed, and then she like basically kills him, and then all these other people start to attack her, and so then she just shoots out all these spikes and stuff like that, and kills all of them instantly. And then after that, there's this helpless old lady with, she's got like a cane and stuff like that. And she basically, the ambulance person just basically, with the symbiote, basically takes her over. And all of a sudden, the person with the cane doesn't need a cane anymore because now she's being controlled by the symbiote, which can heal wounds, by the way. Yeah, miraculously. So yes, there was that whole thing. The old lady. So cutting back to with Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock, he goes on and during the night, basically he goes into the TV or not TV. I'm sorry. It goes into the computer that Anne is, or her computer, and basically goes to the documents, confidential stuff about Carlton Drake and his projects, which is not good in the least. But so after this happens, he goes to his interview and basically starts, asking some questions, regular questions, but then he starts getting into all the rumors and well, actually before this, Carlton Drake's actually talking to I should say he's talking to actual little kids. And there's one person actually decides to ask a question, and he's it's like, oh, don't worry about that, don't worry. He asks, what's your name, and he basically gives her the space badge and stuff like that, and then the assistant person for Carlton Drake basically comes in and he says, you got an appointment. And then you see Eddie Brock, he starts reporting with him, starts asking simple questions, basic questions. And then, he starts getting into the rumors of all the stuff that he's, done. And then he says legal. And then once, with the website, once he was going to play, it was like, I've heard these rumors online. They aren't true, but, that's, not true. And then he says, what about the legal stuff? He's like, okay, we're done. We're done. And like just clears them up. He is like, yes, you are done. And he basically tells Eddie Brock, have a nice life. And this ends up being the catchphrase of the movie, by the way. So yes. Carlton Drake basically blacklists Eddie Brock because after that, he gets confronted by his boss. His boss fires him after he basically can't tell him who his source was, because he didn't have a source. It was just his feeling, and that was really more because of his wife. I mean, he did see the documents, like he did see the documents, like, but he didn't want it, because he technically he got it illegally, so he didn't want to put his wife on that, or his, not his wife, but his engaged to be married wife, his girlfriend, Anne. So he just doesn't have the source, and so he's like, we need to report the truth and stuff like that. And he says, you're fired, basically. He fired Eddie Brock from his job. And so, because he fired him from his job, then shortly after that, we get Eddie Brock and his girlfriend, who basically breaks up with him, and because she got fired from her job for it. So, yeah, that's basically what happens there. So after that whole debacle for Eddie Brock, he basically well, first there's a 6-month time skip. And when they should do the 6-month time skip, it's basically Eddie Brock is basically, secluded. He's not in an apartment by himself. He's alone. And was trying to find a new job. He can't find another job because he's blacklisted, basically. It's going through him. He wants to get his name changed. Like, he even says, like, get my name changed. He can't get his name changed, so there's that too. So, yeah, that's just where it goes with that. So he's a wreck. Meanwhile, Carlton Drake, he is basically now found out how the symbiote works. And, because, he tested it out on a rabbit or a bunny, and it was able to mutate. So because of that, he basically wanted to start using humans. And the doctor assistant is basically like telling him, no, you should wait. And he basically threatened her, how many children do you have, or how old are your children, and stuff like that, because he's the villain, he's got to, it can get this project to work. So he starts bringing in like bums, basically poor bums. Like, he's basically signing or having them sign waivers in case they die and stuff like that. But obviously, this would not be legal to do in any law. But he's doing it anyways, because they're all bums. So that's why he's doing it. Like, so the first guy that he brings in, he, basically tells him, he is, and asks for his name, and then he just basically, talks about the god and stuff like this, and, what they want or whatever, just to give him like pep talk and stuff like that, about him symbioting with, the symbiote. And it doesn't work. And so he gets killed basically from doing it. And basically after he dies, he just basically says, bring in the next patient. That's just, he doesn't give a shit. Like, he's a douchebag. Carlton Drake is basically a douchebag at this point. But you need the villain, so that's why they do this. So while this is going on, you got Eddie Brock, again, he is secluded. Also, I should add that the symbiote person with the old lady is still magically, for 6 months, still walking around, not changing into someone else. And this is something that was mentioned by many people already, so I don't feel sorry for not mentioning it, is that this is a plot hole because for basically 6 months, the possessed old lady being possessed by the symbiote basically for 6 months was in the same body rather than try to shapeshift into something else, within like not too long, of the symbiote possessing the guy, he instantly possessed the ambulance lady and then possessed the old lady. And then for 6 months, for some reason, the old lady just basically that was now possessed by the symbiote was just basically dormanted for like 6 months. I don't exactly know what she was doing for 6 months, but basically she was just walking around doing nothing, I guess, or just I don't know, trying to. I guess try find Carlton Drake. We'll get to this later, but I don't know. But that's probably one of the biggest criticisms of this movie is that I mean all films have their plot holes in them somewhat, but this is one of probably the most noticeable plot holes of the film. Um, yeah, take it for what it is. So basically, the old lady uh, finds this little kid, and I'm glad they don't show it, because I'm against stuff like that with kids getting like killed and stuff like that. It's just to me is kind of wrong, and they don't show it thankfully. But yes, the kid does get basically taken over by the symbiote that's being possessed by the old lady. And we'll get to where she goes later. But that's basically what happens in that whole thing, that symbiote. Um, so, like I said, the symbiote that Carlton Drake is basically trying to simulate with the humans are not working. Um, Meanwhile, Eddie Brock can't find anything. He's at a bar, drinking and stuff like that, and you got TV going off talking about, you know, this whole project, but it's vague, obviously, since Carlton Drake's covering that up, and you know, he's just whatever and stuff like that. He wants to channel change, and he's like, no, some people want to watch this, and one guy is like, once he recognizes him, he's like, aren't you that Eddie Brock, and stuff like that. And so that all happens. Eddie Brock eventually leaves, um, and he ends up going to a well, first he ends up going to first he goes to a grocery store, or he's about to go to a grocery store. He meets this old, or not old lady, but really just a middle-aged type bum lady. She steals like all the free newspapers. Like there's these free papers you can pick out and stuff like that. And she basically uh, basically wants to sell him a free newspaper for like $5. They eventually negotiate before he, gives her the money and stuff like that. My whole thing on that whole scene was it just didn't make sense. I mean, I get it, but one of the things that I don't understand is why Eddie Brock had money. Like, because if he hadn't had a job for like 6 months, I mean, where is he getting his money from? Is he on like what is he on? Is he on welfare? Like what is like that was never really explained. Like in the movie, it was like what is he like? Where is he getting this money? Because he hasn't been like working for 6 months. I mean, I guess with his reporting, I mean, he might still have some money left, but I mean, if he's been like not working for 6 months, where exactly is getting his money from right now at this point? That was the one thing I just didn't get. I mean, obviously he probably has food stamps. I'm gonna just take it a shot in the dark on, but that was the one thing. I mean, I guess they didn't really need to mention that. I guess. I mean, that's getting a little into too much detail, but that was one thing that was just like, well, he's been not working for 6 months. What is he like? What is he doing? Like, where? How is he getting money to have an apartment on his own? Like, I don't know. But whatever. That's nor here nor there. It's just kind of nitpicking right now. But basically, so yeah. Goes in the grocery store. You know, he looks for stuff. He basically looks, you know, looking through, you know, stuff to do. And while this is going on, the cash register is being confronted by a thug, who basically puts a gun to her head and tells him, you know, give me this money that you owe me or whatever, and stuff like that. And so that happens. And after that is over with, and she gives him the money, he leaves. And then Eddie Brock, you know, he basically, you know, is about to put his, you know, stuff, you know, to ring out or whatever. And basically she tells him, you know, life's cruel, Eddie, you know. And so that all happens. Actually, I should say, because this actually happens before that happens, and that is the doctor from Carlton Drake's, you know, facility, basically confronts Eddie Brock and basically tells him that, you know, you were right, about everything. And, you know, after, you know, all the other stuff goes down, he basically, you know, she basically explains everything, you know, you said was true. Comes out of the store, and they basically, you know, he basically explains it, and he says, why don't you go to police? He's like, I can't, and stuff like that, you know, and threatens and stuff like that. And so he gives Venom, or not Venom, he gives Eddie Brock the card, you know, in case he changed his mind. And so yeah, that's what happens. And so then they leave, they part ways. Venom, or Eddie Brock, eventually goes back to the, or he goes to his former girlfriend's house, Anne, whose cat's still there. He mentions, you know, I wanted to just check up on the cat and stuff like that, because, you know, he was looking for the cat, and he sees that Anne is coming home, and he just said he wanted to check on the cat and stuff like that. Is like, he was like, you know, cat didn't like you or whatever. It was like, how do you know? You know, and stuff like that. And so when he comes, or when she walks out of the car, another guy is walking out with them, and it is basically a doctor, the doctor, which was really, in a way, you know, kind of interesting how they set that up. It was like, oh yeah, I'm a doctor, you know. One thing I thought was really funny about this whole thing, when they introduced him, you know, and he was confronted by Eddie Brock with Anne, was the fact that he basically was like, "Oh, you're Eddie Brock. I'm a huge fan," and not even remotely thinking about the possibility that these two were in a relationship. Like, at one point, like, that was the one thing that I just thought was weird. I was like, dude, like, I just felt like this doctor was so stupid. Like, I don't know. Like, he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm a huge fan." Like, I'm like, where have you been for 6 months? Like, he just magically hasn't been on television for like 6 months. Like, does this guy like not know like what happened like to him or whatever? I don't know. Like, I just didn't get it. Like, I was like, what? Does he not know? I mean, I think that was the joke about it, though, because you would have thought like he would come out and be like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" and shit like that. No, he was all chill and shit, you know, like, the whole time. Um, so yeah, basically, you know, they talk, and, you know, he basically goes into her house. The doctor goes in the house, and then Eddie Brock and Ann talk, and they basically said, "No, there's no we. You know, you blew it. You did this on yourself." And so, you know, she parts ways. You know, goes back into her house, and then after that, you know, he basically goes to this, like, you know, bridge thing, I think, and just basically thinks, and he looks at the card, and then he just basically decides to call the doctor, the Carlton Drake's assistant doctor, and basically asks to do this basically. And so next thing you see is them in her car, and they're going to the facility. She says he's hiding in the back, and I should actually also note that before the scene, actually, before he calls, he actually made his way back to the grocery store, and that person wasn't there. To that, which that will come into play later on, but I just wanted to bring that up too. So they go to the facility, and basically they get in there, and while they're walking in there, security guard starts to come up. So he goes into the elevator to where they're doing all these secret experiments on these people, these innocent people. And she basically does a small talk with the security guard, and that's pretty much where that is. While this is going on, he is taking pictures. He is snapping pictures of all these people that are being infected, and whatnot. And so when this happens, he notices that woman that we talked about earlier that was basically sold Eddie Brock the free newspaper or whatever. And he recognizes her right away, and he's like, get me out. And so he's just like, he's smashing through it. He gets like a weapon and just breaks it open. And after he gets it open, then the woman just basically jumps right onto him, and basically, the symbiote just basically carves right onto to Eddie Brock, and then she basically dies. The bum girl just basically dies. So Eddie Brock now has a symbiote. Meanwhile, security is coming in, because there's all this and stuff like that. So now they're going after and Eddie Brock now has superhuman abilities, but he doesn't realize this. They eventually get to the forest. I don't know what it is, but there was a lot of forest scenes in this, movie. They for some reason they were just like going into the forest a lot, or woods. And so, yeah, Eddie Brock, basically to elude capture, he goes on top of this big ass tree and almost falls, but doesn't. He holds on, and then they eventually go away. Carlton Drake's all pissed off at this point. He is pissed. He's like, "What the hell happened? This is bull. What is going on? What happened?" And so he doesn't know where the symbiote is, and so he can't find it, and he's not happy, and so what ends up happening is he tells him, find my symbiote. So then there's an investigation on what happened. He fires the security guard that was on duty. Eventually, it gets back to the point where the security guard actually says that she was, around, I guess, and that's how they find out that she was, involved in this. Which to me was kind of a little weird, because I was like, okay, but I was like, I get it, it makes sense, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that she did it, because there were other people working, there, or at least that's what I interpreted, at least from the security guard, because the security guard, when he talked to her earlier, had said, I didn't know you were supposed to be here, and stuff like that. It was a kind of interpretation, like, there were other people that were there besides, her, especially since when they were going into the gate, there were, guards out there to confront her. So, they basically come to the conclusion that it was her. Meanwhile, Eddie Brock is now starting to develop the symptoms at his house. Like, he's at his house, he's got the phone, with all his stuff on there, and he's just, he's going nuts right now, and he hears voices and stuff like that. He's puking. He's eating like hash browns that are like frosted and stuff like that. I think that was hash browns. He's just, he's going, and then after that he's puking. It's just like he's, oh yeah, and he was eating like bones too. He was eating like old chicken bones and stuff. It was just, some nasty stuff that he was eating at this point. So they confront the doctor, the assistant for Carlton Drake, and he, basically, they're in this room. And this isn't gonna end well at this point. He's in this room, and he basically telling I'm not gonna tell you, what happened and stuff like that. And so he's like, you need to tell me. You need to tell me who this person is. Gives her the small talk and stuff like that. Eventually she tells him that it's Eddie Brock. And so after that, she basically sends out the other symbiote that he has. And basically she gets killed. Also, it's worth noting, too, that he also tries to cover this up, too, and blame it on someone else rather than himself. We also should note at that too, because that comes up later. Meanwhile, now the goons are going after Eddie Brock. So they go to his apartment, and right before, first, actually, before they even get there, he actually knocks on his, next door neighbor's, door, and basically tells him, "Can you lower the volume down, please?" And he's like, "No," and he's like, his eyes just bull right out and stuff like that. And he's like, "Oh my god!" He's like all shocked, and he's like, "Okay, I'll do that." So then he goes back in there, and then about a few minutes later, those goons come, and Venom basically tells Eddie Brock, "Don't answer that." And so Eddie Brock, being dumb, basically does answer it, and so then they, basically attack him, and then Venom basically, comes out and just starts, using the symbiote attacks and just starts taking him out, beating him with a pan, freaking beating him here. It's just so great action. Just so great action right there, you know what I'm saying? So that was really good. Then they just have this, chase. This big whole massive chase to try and get Venom, or try to get Eddie Brock. Motorcycles, just great freaking scenes that they do. Jump scenes off the motorcycle. It's just, oh my god, it was just so fantastic. Just loved it. Eventually you get to the scene where they eventually Eddie Brock's luck runs out. He falls off the bike, and basically his legs are all broken and shit like that. And he's like, I try to get I'm gonna freaking, chew and shit like this. While this is going on too, Carlton Drake realizes that he's, mastered symbiote, and basically tells him, bring him back alive, because, he mastered it, which these other guys haven't. So he heals himself up, instantly, and then turns into Venom and basically fully, becomes Venom. One thing too to notice is there is no the Spidey logo on the Venom symbiote. This is because they're trying to disassociate it from Spider-Man, because Spider-Man does not exist at the moment in this continuity. So that's why Venom doesn't have it. So Venom licks the goon for Cullerton Drake, and he's about to bite his head off, and then this random dude shoots him, and then he turns around and bites his head off instead. So he goes off and he basically escapes from capture, and then they basically they can't get him, so that's kind of where that ends. And then we get to where Venom is talking to Eddie Brock, and he basically tries to explain their situation. Once they're by themselves, he basically explains the situation that they're in, and what he's doing, and basically kind of tell them that he's good, that he's he doesn't want to do this and stuff. Well, he's not good, but I mean, he's basically trying to tell him that it's bad as that. Meanwhile, after this whole failure, too, by the way, I should also mention that Carlton Drake is confronted by that little girl that was possessed by the other symbiote, and they eventually become one. Too. Yes, that does happen. And that is Riot. Riot is I'm not too familiar with Riot, but he is basically the eviler version of Venom, I guess, or at least that's how they depict it in this movie. Is that he is the their race basically wants to take everything over, but Venom doesn't want to do that. Basically Venom also he read Eddie Brock's mind or whatever. He read his mind and stuff like that. So they know who each other are because they know their minds and stuff like that. So they got that whole thing going on. So after this is all done, eventually they go to the next day where Eddie Brock is he's just going mad again, and eventually he tries to find Anne, basically, because he needs help with proving that what they did, basically, because he has the pictures and stuff like that now, and so he's trying to show and these pictures, and they're at this. She's at a restaurant with her new boyfriend, and so he's basically trying to show him this, and then his venom gyrations kick in, so he's going nuts all over the table. He bit like a meat of something that was being about to be served to someone, and then he basically goes into the lobster fish tank or whatever, the lobster fish tank, I guess. And so they basically are like, okay, we're calling the police now and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, don't worry. It's like, this guy is my patient, because he's a doctor, I guess. So he can do that. Apparently, he's my patient. Yes, because he's Eddie Brock, so he's my patient. Yes, that's the only reason. Is the only reason. He is my patient. Damn it. So that's going to prevent me from calling the police. Yes, that happens. Anyways, so what happens then after this is they basically do a CAT scan on him in the doctor's office, and it basically drives him mad because Venom symbiote is weak to sound waves. Basically, that's one of the symbiote's weakness is sound waves and fire. So yeah, that didn't work exactly. So they after that goes on, they basically try to examine what was going to happen to him, and basically he leaves the place. So after Venom leaves, he basically then wants to go after his boss, his former boss. So he goes to the office, and the secretary's there again. Guy gave a hard time, and he's like, I gotta see him, and he's like, no, I can't let you see that. You don't work here anymore. You know what I'm saying? I like you, but I can't do that anymore. So then, Venom starts, talking to him, and so he starts talking to him, and he's like, oh, I take him out, and he's like, no, you don't do that. And so then he just ends up leaving. And then Venom basically tells him, because he looks on top of the building, and he's like, you want up? Why didn't you just say so? And so he goes on top of there, and he literally goes on top of the building. And like he's just looking through the whole building, and then he starts to fall because like he hears a sound wave, and like that just screws everything up. And so eventually he puts the the Venom arm out to save him, and then he basically just busts right through the office room, which just happens to be the same office room that he needs to go to. He basically gives his cell phone away. He could have just printed, the pictures out from his cell phone, at his local library or something like that. Just thinking outside the box. But he actually gives the entire cell phone with the pictures in it, and then just gives a note, telling him, here's your proof, and stuff like that. After that, he is basically confronted again by, people with gas masks and stuff like that. And he's like, you don't want this, you don't want this. It was like, they're about to shoot him. He was like, okay, it's like he turns into Venom and basically takes them out and whatnot. So, and after that, he's about to leave, and then he sees Anne, who sees him as Venom, and he basically tells him, it's me, and he's like, and he's like, doctors. She's basically like, doctor's office now, doctor's office now. And so puts him in the car, and like he's like, no, I don't want to go. And he's like, no, go with her and stuff like that. And so he puts in the car, and so they eventually go to the doctors after they do their little talk. He does like, it was kind of funny actually with the stuff they were saying. You need to be with her and stuff. Like Venom was like, you need to be with her. So once I get back to the doctor's office, what happens is, Venom basically tells him no CAT scan again, so can't do that. Eventually, what happens is he goes into the office or goes into the the CAT scan room, and basically Anne basically runs the sound waves, and because of that, he gets the symbiote out and basically traps him into the other room. And this was done on purpose by her because he wanted it out of him. And the doctor doesn't even know what the hell's going on because, like, you know, because at this point he's just thinking there was just something unusual in him because they were calling to find him. That's why Anne was looking for her. But after she found out about the whole Venom thing, it kind of just changed everything. He's like, well, what's going on here? And meanwhile, while they're talking about this, you know, there was a little scene that, you know, she was like, you know, that trust me, there's nothing going on between us and whatnot, which I was like, really? You're going to bring that obvious stuff out there? And then the doctor, being as stupid as he is, he actually is like, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about this thing that's inside of him. So that was funny though. That was fun. That was hilarious. So they go in, and you know, so he doesn't have a symbiote anymore. But the symbiote can go through, which Anne didn't realize, is that it can go through, you know, the cracks and stuff like that, the sewer pipes and stuff like that. So that's what it did. It went through the heat thing, and went out and took control of a dog. Yes, it took over a dog's body. And then after that, it just so happened that the dog would be right in front of Anne. And so it took over Anne, but it didn't show it. And so that is. Meanwhile, Eddie Brock was being pursued by Carlton Drake's people, basically, and was captured, but he didn't have it, and so Carlton Drake basically confronts him about it and tells him, you know, tries to get him on his side, but doesn't work. And by this point, as I said, he has Riot fused with him. So, you know, he talks about that, and obviously Eddie Brock's not going to give it up. So while this is going on, then the goons eventually just decide, you know, they're going to kill him, basically. While he basically decides to go into space. That's what Carlton Drake wants to do now, is he wants to go in space with Riot. So then they're in the woods, and he's about to kill them, and then the two guys just magically disappear from some arm symbiote thing, and then the third one is confronted by She-Venom, which is just Amy, or just Anne, I'm sorry, Anne, with you know, the symbiote. But it was really cool though. I liked seeing the She-Venom. That was actually pretty cool. And then after he took him out, they did a kiss scene where basically Anne kissed Eddie Brock, and by doing that, that gave the symbiote back to Eddie Brock. And basically Anne said, you know, I can help out too. And he was like, no, you can't. It's just me. He was like, you son of a bitch. You know, that was actually funny. She was not happy about that. So then, meanwhile, Riot was basically trying to get into space. Venom's trying to stop him. They have this epic fight, and there's this epic cinematic scene where you see Riot and you see Venom, you know, fighting it out and stuff like that. It's a really good fight. I loved it. It was really good. and a lot of action. And eventually, they keep going back and forth. Their symbiotes, they lose their symbiotes, they get their symbiotes back. There's actually a scene at one point where Venom just Venom loses the symbiote, or Eddie Brock loses the symbiote, and Charlton Drake was knocked overboard, but as he's walking back, behind his back, Carlton Drake with Riot stabs him with a knife, and it looks like basically Eddie Brock is going to die. And then at the last second, Venom fuses back with him right before he's about to die with the knife. It was kind of weird because it looked like he was basically dead. I mean, it does take a few seconds for someone to die through a knife like that once you lose blood, but he got back in there just in time before he was about to kick the bucket. And Eddie Brock then lived basically because with being fused with Venom, you can regenerate and stuff like that, the organs and stuff. So fuses back with them, and but while this is going on, Carlton and Riot are basically going into space, so they're going in the rocket now. And basically then after that, Venom basically takes the knife and just stabs through it, which jams the rocket, and basically screws up his plans, and he basically says, "Have a nice life," as he goes into the water. It looks like Venom is going to die. The Venom symbiote is going to die because it just deattaches to Eddie Brock as he jumps into the water, or as he goes into the water. And Eddie Brock is still alive. Everything is good, but we don't know anything about Venom at this point. So after this is all done, they talk about it, and at this point, Anne doesn't know that Venom doesn't know that Venom is still in him until we, the audience, hear it. From Eddie Brock, about Venom, about Anne and stuff like that. Because they talk about the kiss scene and stuff like that. Which is really cool. We don't know how Venom lived, or the symbiote lived, but it did. And I can't say the same for Riot and Carlton Drake, as they died, or at least it appeared to. So they talk about that shortly after that. Not exactly knowing if they're going to get back together, but I think they will eventually. You have this scene where Stan Lee makes an appearance with a dog, and giving him, some pep talk about the situation, which is kind of always cool to, see an occasional Stan Lee cameo. After that, after doing that cameo, you basically see Eddie Brock go back to the grocery store, and before he goes to the grocery store, he basically explains, you can't kill, good people, only bad people, in terms of biting their heads off and stuff like that. Which, by the way, I forgot to mention, he did bite off the head of Carlton Drake's, top goon too, which was fitting. So basically, at the end, he says only, we can only bite heads off of bad people, not good people. Basically in this movie, Venom is depicted more as a good guy, anti-hero, than a anti-hero bad guy like he is in the comics. I don't have an issue with that, because the only reason why he is a villain in the first place is because of Spider-Man and being his rival. And since Spider-Man is not in this movie, it makes sense that he's more of an anti-hero that is more of a hero, since Spider-Man doesn't exist, which means there is no rival competition for Venom. So that's the only way you could have made this film work. And I know a lot of people are going to complain about that, but to be completely honest, I think the film did better the fact that they did do this. Not every film is 100% accurate to the source material, as long as they get it right to the source material and not exactly change major things. I don't think it's a major issue, which is what they did. They basically tried to make a movie where it was kind of like more just about Venom if Spider-Man didn't exist, and that's exactly how they portrayed it. So that's what they did. Now, getting back to this whole thing in the grocery store, you see that same person asking the same cash register, early in the movie with, for the money. He has a gun to her head, and basically Venom, or basically, Eddie Brock says, bad guy, or Venom basically asks Eddie Brock, bad guy, and he's like, yeah. And so basically he, confronts him and turns into Venom, and basically tells him, don't you do this again or I'm going to come back for you, and stuff like that, and threatens him. And then you see Eddie Brock, and the, behind it and stuff like that. And he basically talks to him. He's like, who are you? And he's like, we are Venom. And then basically he tells him, that, don't do this again or I'm going to eat your head off. And then he's like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to eat your head off anyways. And so he eats his head off. And, then he turns back into Eddie Brock and just looks at the cash register. He's like, no, yeah, he's like, something wrong. She basically says something wrong. And he's like, no, it's just a parasite. And when he walks out of the room, because this is an issue with Venom, is like, like, parasite, I'm not a parasite. And he's like, it's like the right term for it or whatever. And he's like, that's what people think. It's like, apologize, and he kept demanding, and he eventually apologizes for it. And that was the end of the movie. A very, very good movie, like I said. A lot of action. This is if you're into action movies, this is a movie for you. This is a movie that had lots of action. It had lots of drama. It had somewhat comedy into it, and it also had an occasional horror into it as well. Not as much horror, but it did have those, creepy scenes, on occasion. It goes to the credits. And then middle way to the credits, there is an after ending scene, which is a scene where you see Eddie Brock now has his job back, and he talks to this correctional officer about this certain character, and basically eventually gets confronted, or eventually shows up, and there's just basically this guy in this, there's a cage. And then there's another cage that he's locked into, and he is basically handcuffed, so he can't even do anything. Like, his legs are handcuffed, his arms are handcuffed. He is in this small-ass cage. He can't walk, can't move, in this bar cage by himself. And basically, he basically has to do a report on him. The guy's name is Cletus Cassidy, and he basically talks to him and, asks questions about him, and because he's a serial, killer, and basically says, at the end with the pun of Carnage, hinting at the sequel of being Carnage, and Venom 2 is pretty much confirmed at this point. So there's no need to derail those details. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with Carnage, whether they call it Venom 2 or they call it Venom Maximum Carnage. I'm very curious. I would actually like them to call Venom Maximum Carnage. That would actually be kind of cool, rather than just calling it Venom 2 or something like that. But so then they go back to the credits, and there is about, I think, a 2 or 3 minute spot Spider-Man animational preview thing into the Spider-Verse. I wasn't really interested in that. I didn't really care about that. When they said it was from another universe, I was like thinking that they were going to show some type of Spider-Man cameo because Spider-Man might be in the next movie or something like that, because a lot of people had thought that would possibly happen. That wasn't happening, at least for now. My whole thing with this teaser, sneak preview of 2 to 3 minutes of the Into Spider-Man animated movie that Sony made, I just don't understand why they did it. I don't understand why they gave this, like, they included this into the movie, because I mean, it was already out there. There was already a trailer on this whole animated movie, so I don't see the point in them doing a preview for it. That's just my opinion on it. So overall, like I said, this film was a 9 out of 10. Like I said, the portrayal of Venom being more of an anti-hero hero rather than an anti-hero villain, I thought worked. I thought they did it really good. There was, this movie was a pretty good way of setting it up for a PG-13 movie. They had the occasional comedy in there, but they didn't make it too comedy. They put those pun jabs in there now and then, and then they went right back to the action, and then they, just everything was just spectacular about this movie. Like I said, a couple plot holes and continuity errors. Like the biggest one was the whole 6-month gap for the symbiote, the Riot symbiote, that basically was stuck in an old lady for 6 months before finally going to the girl and then going to Davis there. That was probably the biggest issue of this whole movie. But overall, I liked everyone's portrayal. I am looking forward to whenever they decide to do the next movie with Carnage. I'm assuming Carnage will be in the next movie. It would kind of make no sense for him not to be in the movie for the sequel. But yeah, I was very happy with this. Like I said, this was the superhero, in my personal opinion, this was the superhero movie of the year. And I put that up against any MCU film and for this year that was done. I do, and I want people to understand something. I do like MCU films. I don't like every MCU film, but that's mainly because I only watch certain superheroes from Marvel. So I watch my favorites. I don't watch like every single movie that the Marvel Cinematic Universe produces, because I only want to watch the superheroes that I'm interested in. You know what I'm saying? Same with DC. I don't like every superhero in DC. I probably like more DC superheroes than Marvel superheroes. But obviously I don't like Superman. Speaking of Superman, though, by the way, I would like to mention that they did put a kryptonite pun in here, which I thought was very, very weird that was mentioned. That was mentioned in the film. I thought that was really weird because, I mean, it is a Marvel movie. Why would you be mentioning that? I know in the past Sony has mentioned stuff from DC. In the past, like in the Spider-Man movies, they had mentioned stuff like in Spider-Man 1, because I did watch Spider-Man 1 because Randy Savage was in that movie. They did mention Superman in that movie, which I thought was weird at the time, and still think it's weird now that they mentioned Superman, or they mentioned kryptonite. So I thought that was kind of, I don't know why they did that. But they did. So there were a couple errors and stuff like that they put in the film. But overall, I'd still give it a 9 out of 10 because, like I said, this film had everything that you would want in a film. It had action, it had occasional comedy in it, but it didn't make it too. It didn't over exaggerate the comedy to the point where it was getting stupid. They did it when it was necessary. You had a couple horror things at the beginning that made it more even dynamic. And then you, of course, had, the superhero action that was in this as well. And you slightly had a love story too in there too as well. So you pretty much had everything you wanted in this film. And you also got a Stan Lee cameo for all you Stan Lee fans out there. So I think it did pretty good for itself. I liked it. I was very happy with it. I waited 15 years for a Venom film. So they did not let me down. Sony Pictures did not let me down. And I'm looking forward to seeing the sequel with Carnage in it. Hopefully not Spider-Man in it. I'd rather not Spider-Man be in the film. If he's in the film, fine. If he's not, I don't give a shit that he isn't. I won't be upset that he isn't in the film. Because I'm not a fan of Spider-Man. I'm a fan of Venom. Randy Savage, because that's my favorite all-time wrestler. Ooh, yeah, because he was in the first Spider-Man film. He was in the first Spider-Man film. That's why I watched that film, because Savage was in it. I remember that. That was like the talk of the town when Macho Man was in it. I was like, yeah, he was. Macho Man was Bonesaw. That was Macho Man. For anyone who doesn't watch wrestling, that was Randy Savage. That didn't realize that, but I mean, people should have known that was Randy Savage. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Like I said, I thought this film was well done. Very good film. Well done, Sony, and hopefully we get another one. Comment, rate, and do you think there will be a crossover between them and the MCU now that the film is successful, or do you think Sony is just going to keep Venom by himself with Carnage with their own trilogy? Let me know what you guys think. I personally think they are okay with doing it by themselves. If they do eventually cross over with the MCU, I think it could work either way. But what they're doing right now, I think, will just be as fine. But again, that's my review of this. Like I said, if you like this video, my videos, subscribe, comment, rate. If you like this video, my videos, subscribe. That's about it, guys. We are Venom. I'm the SS Ultimate Goku, and I'm out of here. Peace.